United States is sending nearly 3,000 additional troops to the Middle East as tensions continue to escalate following the killing of Iran's top military leader. The United States is South Sudan's president pardons prominent economist Peter Biar Ajak. And rescue operations continue in Cambodia, where at least 4 people have died after a building collapsed. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo and this is From the South. Sorrow and anger, that is the overwhelming sentiment in Iran after a U.S. missile strike killed the top general and hero of the Islamic Republic, Qasem Soleimani. People chanted death to America at Friday prayers in Tehran. Many were in tears as they paid homage to the man who was regarded as the second most important figure in Iran. Soleimani was killed by an airstrike at Baghdad airport along with the second in command of the Popular Mobilization Units of Iraq. Soleimani and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis were traveling in a vehicle on the Baghdad International Airport Road when the U.S. missile struck. Several others were also killed in the attack. It came after a decision by the Iraqi parliament to cease the relationship of cooperation with the United States after its earlier airstrikes on the Popular Mobilization Unit last Sunday. The Pentagon later confirmed that President Donald Trump had ordered the strike on Soleimani. Iran's Revolutionary Guard and the foreign minister condemned the murder.
This temporary joy of the Americans and the Zionists will not last long before it turns to grief. The Islamic Revolution Guard Corps, the Persian people of Iran, and the front of resistance throughout the geographical latitude of the Islamic world will take revenge of this proud martyr Qasem Soleimani.
America's action, without any doubt, is an act of state terrorism and a violation of Iraq's sovereignty, which is murdering people who dedicated their entire lives to fighting tyranny, oppression, terror and extremism. He and Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, his martyred comrade, had an outstanding role in the combat of Iraqi and Syrian people against the Islamic State group. Perhaps America's action was a response to the pain that this great man had inflicted on them. Qasem had destroyed what America had built and nurtured, that is, IS, with the assistance and struggles of the peoples of Syria, Iraq and the region. This was a heavy blow for the United States. The pure and holy blood of Qasem Soleimani will definitively make the tree of resistance more robust and make Iranian people more united. It will also make US policies more scandalous and less effective than before.
Later in the day, tens of thousands took to the streets in Tehran and other cities across Iran to protest against the killings. Many of the demonstrators demanded a swift and decisive response against the United States. But many analysts say Iran and its various allied resistance movements in the region are likely to take their time to choose how and when to respond.
Certainly avenge the unjust bloodshed of General Soleimani in the most severe way, so that these aching hearts will be healed.
We must give the most crushing response. If it was me, I would have launched 50 missiles against America right now.
Hundreds of mortars also gathered outside Soleimani's home in the southern Iranian city of Kerman. They paid tribute to the man they regarded as a hero of the oppressed and said his death would only strengthen their resistance.
Qasem wasn't just a warrior or commander. He was the hope of the oppressed people all around the world.
The United States must know that this very day, as we speak, new Qasem Soleimanis are being born.
Wafika Ibrahim from Telesur's sister channel Al Mayadeen has more on Qasem Soleimani and his murder from Beirut.
The resistance movement has lost the deputy leader of the Popular Mobilization Units, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis. alongside the commander of Al-Quds of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, Qasem Soleimani, in this U.S. missile attack close to the Baghdad airport. Al-Mayadeen has been able to refute the mistaken reports of the arrest of other important Iraqi figures by the U.S. Marines. Sources close to the Iranian government say there will be a strong retaliation against the United States for this assassination of Soleimani. Martyrdom was something that General Soleimani knew could come at any time, and indeed it did. At the beginning of this new year in Baghdad, Soleimani was born in Kernan in 1957. And in the course of his military career, he became the person most feared by the enemies of Iran, especially by Washington. The danger he represented for the United States government was not limited to Iran, but took in what has become known as the axis of resistance. He joined Iran's Revolutionary Guard in the year of the revolution, 1979. His military skills and leadership qualities led him to become the commander of the Al-Quds Special Forces, part of the Revolutionary Guard, in 1998. Al-Quds is responsible for the military activity of the resistance forces outside Iran. He strengthened Iran's relations with these resistance forces against Israel, against U.S. hegemony in the region, and against terrorism from Iraq to Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and Gaza. Soleimani was the second most important person in Iran, after the supreme spiritual leader of the revolution, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Recent opinion polls show Soleimani as the most popular figure in Iran, followed by Foreign Minister Zarif. In recent years, he played a prominent role in the struggle against the Islamic State group, both in Syria and in Iraq. The assassination of these two leaders in the heart of Baghdad was no doubt intended to create the impression of a defeat for the resistance movement. This is a movement that doesn't react over hastily, but the United States has clearly expressed its decision to take the path of war. We don't know whether this will lead to open war, but analysts are clear that Iran will react, and there will be at least a war of attrition against U.S. bases and interests in this region. The head of one think tank in Tehran said, "We will take the strongest revenge for this murder." And an advisor to the Iranian president said, "Trump has put the region in a very dangerous situation, and the United States will have to face the consequences of what it has done." Newsweek is reporting that U.S. Patriot missiles in Bahrain have been put on alert, but the response to this killing will not come only from Iran. All the other forces of the resistance in the region are likely to respond too.
The U.S. government has approved sending about 3,000 additional troops to the Middle East as tensions continue to escalate following Soleimani's death. The troops would be joining the roughly 750 forces that were sent to Kuwait earlier this week. The deployment also comes following the violent demonstration outside the U.S. Embassy compound in the Iraqi capital. Meanwhile, U.S. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden has condemned the killing of Soleimani, calling it an enormous escalation in an already tense relationship with Iran.
This is and was an enormous escalation, and it follows a string of dubious actions that President Trump has taken that have drastically increased the prospects and the risk of war with Iran and danger to Americans.
The Hezbollah movement in Lebanon has strongly condemned the killing of Qasem Soleimani. In a statement read out on the Al-Manar TV station, the organization's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, expressed his condolences to the people of Iran. He also paid tribute to Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, the leader of Iraq's Kataib Hezbollah movement, who was killed in the attack alongside Soleimani. He said the U.S. killers will not achieve any of their goals with this crime and that resistant fighters will carry on the work of the Iranian leader. From Gaza, the Palestinian movement Hamas added its voice to the condemnation.
The Islamic resistance movement Hamas condemns the crime committed by the United States, the assassination of Major General Qasem Soleimani, one of the most prominent Iranian military leaders who had a clear and prominent role in supporting the Palestinian resistance and Palestinian cause. This crime reflects the American recklessness in the region and its violation of state sovereignty and its role in increasing tension in the region only to serve the interests of the Zionist enemy.
Meanwhile, the State Department has urged U.S. citizens to leave Iraq immediately. The U.S. said there was a tension in the region and blamed it on Iraq's popular mobilization units. They were protesting at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad over a recent airstrike that killed dozens of its members. China urged the United States to remain calm and exercise restraint to avoid any further escalation of tension.
China has always opposed the use of force in international relations. We advocate that all sides should earnestly respect the goals and principles of the Charter of the United Nations and the basic norms of international relations. Iraq's sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity should be respected. The stability and peace in the Middle East and Gulf region should be maintained.
In the UK, the head of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, said this attack was an, quote, extremely serious and dangerous escalation of conflict. He called on the UK government to urge restraint from the United States and avoid global consequences. And the U.S. presidential candidate Bernie Sanders said this was a dangerous escalation that brings the United States closer to another war in the Middle East. He said Trump's decisions could cost countless lives and trillions of dollars. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. A hearing is taking place in Peru to analyze the arrest warrant against Keiko Fujimori for alleged corruption. In November, Fujimori was released from preventive detention after 13 months behind bars following a constitutional court decision. The former presidential candidate is accused of receiving illegal funds for her campaign from the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht. The attorney in charge of the case has asked for her to be returned to prison and has now included new charges against Fujimori. Over 200 houses have been flooded in central Peru following heavy rains. 8 hours of rain caused the rivers Pachitea and Aucayacu rivers to burst their banks. Meanwhile, in Pasco, about 290 kilometers east of Lima, local authorities have requested urgent help from the Ministry of Transport after the highway was wiped out by the overflow of a river. But flooding has also been reported in the country's northeast Amazonian region that borders Ecuador, Colombia, and Brazil. Moving on, Mexico's president has called for the release of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, calling his detention torture.
I hope he's forgiven and released. I don't know if he has recognized that he acted against norms of a political system. But at the time, these cables demonstrated how the world system functions in its authoritarian nature.
The Revolutionary Force of the Commons, the FARC political party, has denounced the murder of a former combatant in the Cauca department. Benjamin Banguera Rosales was undergoing a process of reintegration when he was shot and killed in the municipality of Huapi. This marks the first murder of a former member of the FARC guerrilla in 2020. According to the United Nations, since the signing of the peace agreement, more than 170 members of the group have been assassinated. The Argentine government has announced it will freeze public transport tariffs in Buenos Aires for 120 days. During those 3 months, President Alberto Fernández says his government will reassess the prices of public transport, not just in the capital, but across the country. The government has also suggested to provincial leaders to follow the capital's example and freeze the tariffs in their respective areas. The Bolivian president, Evo Morales, has presented the Argentinian legal team that will help defend him in the face of accusations from the de facto authorities who seized power in November's coup. The team includes 2 eminent jurists, Gustavo Ferreira and Raúl Zaffaroni. Evo Morales said their contribution would be invaluable not only to defend him against Bojo's accusations of sedition, but also to defend the constitutional order in Bolivia and, above all, the people of the country. One of the legal advisors, Gustavo Ferreira, said there is no constitutional order in Bolivia, and he pointed out that the country would enter a constitutional vacuum on January 22nd when the mandate of both President Morales and the current Legislative Assembly come to an end.
In this sense, the Bolivian Assembly has still neither accepted nor rejected the president's resignation. Therefore, constitutionally, the president of the plurinational state of Bolivia is the person who is with us here today. We think it's very important for everyone in Latin America to take note of this because it will be a very bad precedent of a kind we've never seen before. I would like to add that the Bolivian Constitution of 2009 makes clear that all the actions of anyone who usurps power or who assumes functions which are not theirs are entirely null and void.
The Colombian government has agreed to an increase of just 6% in the minimum wage for the coming year. That is well below what workers are demanding.
Around 10 million Colombians waited anxiously for the increase in the minimum wage for 2020. They were hoping that tripartite meetings between the unions, businessmen and the government would give the green light to the workers' demand for at least $305 a month, which would be an increase of 8.11%. But once again, the negotiations failed, and the government decreed an increase of just 6%, taking the minimum wage to $298 a month.
Wages are still rising below the rate of productivity, and the minimum wage is a wage that doesn't cover the cost of basic needs. Colombia is living through a critical situation due to the low purchasing power and the sluggish dynamic of the domestic market. If you want the economy to grow, the most important factor is the need for demand to increase, to raise people's incomes, to generate a rise in production.
Workers argue that this government is on the side of the businessmen and doesn't give importance to the difficulties faced by workers who earn the minimum wage. They struggle to survive, especially if the family has more than 2 children and they have to pay for rent and schools. They say this increases inequality and doesn't boost the economy.
This is a very low wage, and it shows that the government always sides with the businessmen, as they did with the tax reform that was a big gift to employers. And now they are giving them a new present and not allowing wages to become too expensive, as the businessmen put it for us. This not only frustrates people's hopes of earning a little more, it also shows that we won't be able to reactivate the economy.
Around 10 million Colombians depend on the minimum wage. They suggest that businessmen and the government put themselves in their shoes and try to live on such a low income. They want them to think not only about their own profits, but also about their workers' welfare.
It is unfair that we get a minimum readjustment, while members of Congress earn very well and also get a pension for life. It's unfair that they earn millions and the Colombian people don't earn even enough for the basics.
This is really a mockery of the people, because they don't listen to the people. They don't know who they are governing or where they are. I say that they truly have to hear the people. This minimum wage is a disgrace. I don't know anyone who can live on this minimum wage.
While businessmen insist that a big effort was made to increase the wage and purchasing power of the population, economists predict a rise of 6% or more in the prices of basic goods, as well as rents and penalties. And this will just erode further the income of the 10 million workers whose only income is that minimum wage.
We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. South Sudanese President Salva Kiir has pardoned economist and Cambridge PhD student Peter Biar Ajak, who has been detained since July 2018. He was held for 8 months without charge in the National Security Service headquarters and was later charged over a riot at the establishment in October of 2018. Later, Biar managed to give an interview to the U.S. news service Voice of America. This led to prosecutors arguing that his interviews with foreign media amounted to espionage, and in June of 2019, a judge sentenced him to 2 years in prison for spying. Biar has been an outspoken critic of the South Sudan's leadership and their role in the country's civil war. In Cambodia, at least 4 people have died and more than 16 people have been injured after a building under construction collapsed. Police says an estimated 11 workers remain trapped after a 7-story concrete structure in the coastal town of Kep collapsed. An investigation have been launched into the cause of the collapsed nature of the structure and ownership of the building. This as Cambodia is currently undergoing a construction boom to serve growing crowds of Chinese tourists and investors. French police have shot dead a man near Paris after he went on the rampage with a knife in a park, killing 1 person and injuring 2 more. The man had attacked several people in the suburb of Villejuif before the police shot him dead. There is not immediate details regarding his identity or any potential motive for the attack. In the past 4 years, Paris has been rocked by major attacks resulting in mass casualties. In November of 2015, the bombings and shootings at the Bataclan Theater and nearby locations killed 130 people in the deadliest attacks in France since World War II.
What we believe we know at the moment is that his murderous rampage, the perpetrator attempted to attack other victims who were able to evade him. And unfortunately, he got to 3 persons, one of whom has died, as I have told you.
With the pension strike in France into its 30th day, trade unions say they will be stepping up the stoppage next week. The General Secretary of the main CGT union, Philippe Martinez, has been out on the streets of Paris campaigning for greater awareness of what the government's pension reform means for workers. He said public support for the strike remains strong and that the government has been confused in its response.
We are starting on Monday. I think that in the refineries, when I listened to the news, I saw that it will start on Tuesday. So it will be as workers come back to work, after the period when the companies were closed. That means that from next week, it's starting again, with a high point on Thursday, maybe Friday, certainly on Saturday.
At least 43 people are now known to have died in the floods that hit the capital of Indonesia earlier this week. Many areas in the east of Jakarta and surrounding areas are still underwater. Local residents and recovery teams have been struggling to remove damaged cars and open access to those still trapped. Police in the neighborhood of Lebak said they were searching for 8 people who were missing. The rains on Monday and Tuesday were the most intense in the region for more than 2 decades.
I did not manage to evacuate anything. I lost my small warung. My house remains, but the windows and doors are gone.
We have evacuated people from several places. It is impossible for them because particularly Lebak is badly devastated with no access for vehicles.
On Thursday, the Turkish parliament passed a bill to send troops to Libya to support the United Nations-backed government in Tripoli. Libya's government of national accord has been under sustained attack since April by military strongman General Khalifa Haftar. He is backed by Turkey's rival Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates. There are no details on the scale of the potential military deployment, and no date has been set either. After the vote, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, warned the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan not to interfere. The White House said that foreign interference is complicating the situation in Libya. The forces of General Khalifa Haftar have had difficulty in advancing on Tripoli after months of an unsuccessful siege. Meanwhile, Greece, Cyprus, and Israel have signed a deal for the so-called estimated pipeline project to ship gas from the Eastern Mediterranean to Europe, despite Turkey's hostility to the agreement. The move comes amid tensions with Turkey over its activities in the area and a maritime deal, with Libya expanding Ankara's claims over a large gas-rich area of the sea. The 2,000-kilometer pipeline will be able to carry between 9 and 12 billion cubic meters of gas a year from offshore reserves held by Israel and Cyprus to Greece and other southeastern European countries. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telecer English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.